Well, if you're listening when this episode first releases, today is Memorial Day, and I'd be remiss if I didn't pause to acknowledge its deeper meaning. This isn't just a long weekend or the unofficial start of summer, it's a day to remember those who gave everything in service to our country. Their sacrifice allows us to live with freedoms we often take for granted. So, before we dive into today's episode, let's take a moment to honor the men and women who laid down their lives so that we could live ours. We remember. We are grateful. Thank you. Have you ever finished something, a project, a season, even a holiday, and instead of feeling complete or content, you feel a little disoriented? It's not that anything is wrong, but something inside feels untethered, like you're floating in the quiet aftermath. The momentum that carried you through the last few weeks or months has suddenly stopped, and now you're standing in stillness, wondering what comes next. It's in these moments that our internal compass begins to wobble a little bit. Not broken, just searching for true north. Welcome to Q on Q. We're coming off of our series, What Now? Discovering the What's Next. This summer, we're going to be headed into a series talking about connections. But before we get there, I want to talk about something very specific this week. And I think we all find ourselves in this place at one point or another. The sacred in between space, the space after the noise, before the next chapter. We often resist these moments, trying to force some sort of clarity or hurry into something else when we're not ready. But maybe a pause isn't a problem to fix. Maybe it's a gift. Maybe it's here to invite us into something deeper: reflection, realignment, or possibly even renewal. You see, life isn't just made up of the big events or the defining milestones. It's built in the quiet transitions between them. The moments when you stop to ask, what just happened? And what do I really want to do now? Who am I becoming? These aren't distractions from your purpose, they're really essential to it. These are times that all of us need to recalibrate. As somebody who would go out and use a compass outside would say, time to find true north. Picture that compass for a minute, pointing to true north, giving us direction. But then there's times that we lose our sense of direction and we lose that sense of where north truly is, and we need a recalibration. Without recalibrating, we risk charging ahead in directions that no longer reflect our values and our growth. So today we're going to give ourselves permission to pause, not forever, just long enough to listen, to look inward, to find our footing before we move forward. Because the best journeys, the most meaningful ones, don't start right off the bat with motion. They start with direction. And that starts when we choose to recalibrate. There's a moment after the music stops, after the applause fades, after the final box is checked, we find ourselves sitting in the quiet. We talked about that in the past few episodes. The big moment is past, the energy is slowed, and we're no longer riding the adrenaline of accomplishment or change. And in that stillness, something strange can happen. We start to feel maybe even a little lost. It's as if we've been coasting on a moving walkway and suddenly it stops. And now we have to walk forward on our own. I think about the moving walkways at the airport when you go to pick somebody up or to head out on a flight. And those things are moving pretty quickly. Can you imagine if you were going on them and all of a sudden they stopped? You'd probably fall flat on your face. It's jarring. It truly is. It's important to say this up front. The drift you feel at this point, if you're in this state, is completely normal. In fact, it's a sign that you're paying attention. Life transitions, whether they're tied to the end of a season, a project, or a school year, or even a spiritual high point, they often bring a sense of emotional floating. We may not be off course, but we are often unconnected or, untethered from the momentum that carried us. There's no shame in that. Doesn't mean you're lazy, doesn't mean you're broken. It could just mean you're adjusting. The drift is often where clarity starts to begin. Think about the disciples after Jesus' resurrection. Even after witnessing the most miraculous event in history, they still didn't know what came next. Some went back to their jobs from before. Some gathered in rooms behind locked doors. The presence of God was with them, and they were still unsure. If they felt uncertain, surely we can give ourselves the grace to not have it all figured out right away. We live in a culture that doesn't like us to drift. It wants us to sprint from one thing to the next, from finish line to fresh start, without space to breathe in between. But that pause, that unsettling stillness, it's actually sacred ground. It's in that quiet that we hear what the rush would drown out. We begin to ask questions like, what now? What do I want from this next chapter? Where am I being invited to grow? And those questions, uncomfortable as they might be, are the very beginning of purpose reawakening. Drifting might be natural, but it's not permanent. There comes a moment when the fog starts to thin and you realize it's time to stop floating and start realigning. But recalibration doesn't begin with action, it starts with awareness. Before we can move, before we can chart a course forward, we have to clear the compass. You see, when life shakes us through endings or changes, or even just the quiet passing from one season into another, it's easy for our inner direction to get scrambled, like a magnetic compass influenced by outside forces. We start picking up signals that aren't really ours, expectations from others, or cultural definitions of success, or pressure to always be moving forward. And before we know it, our decisions are being guided by noise instead of by what truly aligns with who we are. Clearing the compass means intentionally turning down that noise. It's the discipline of pausing, not because we're lazy or confused, but because clarity lives on the other side of quiet. We don't recalibrate by pushing harder. We recalibrate by listening better. And that can look like a lot of things. Taking a walk without your phone, sitting with a single question for a few days, journaling. What's really important to me now? It sounds simple, but the quiet asks something of us: patience, trust, and the courage to be honest with ourselves. One reason I think we resist this step is because stillness can feel unproductive. Our culture rewards hustle and immediate answers, so choosing to slow down feels counterproductive sometimes. But what if the pause isn't a delay? What if it's divine timing? What if the space between seasons is actually sacred ground, where your truest values and desires begin to rise to the surface again? Spiritually speaking, even Jesus withdrew to quiet places, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. He modeled a rhythm of engagement and retreat, of clarity gained in the wilderness before stepping into public action. Think of how many times he did that in the scriptures. We need that rhythm too. Because clearing the compass is less about fixing something broken and more about rediscovering what was always there. Maybe it was a deeper calling. Maybe it was a true longing for something. Maybe it was the God given direction that is uniquely yours. When we make room for that internal clarity, we begin to feel a shift, subtle but strong. The compass settles, not with a loud proclamation or a lightning bolt moment, but with a quiet confidence that says, this is where you're meant to go next. And that's where the journey truly begins. Once the compass is cleared and the noise is quieted, what remains is an invitation. not just to drift into the next season, but to step into it with intention. This is the moment to choose, to ask, what will guide me forward? In this space, we don't just follow direction, we claim it as our own. You see, there's a difference between moving and being moved. I want to say that again. There is a difference between moving and being moved. So often we slide into that next thing, a new job, a relationship, or a busy schedule because it shows up, not because it aligns with what matters most. But recalibrating your life isn't about reaction, it's about resolution. This is where the concept of true north becomes more than just a metaphor. It becomes a filter, a way of aligning decisions with your deeper identity and purpose. Choosing your true north means getting clear on the values you want to live by. Maybe it's peace, maybe it's presence, maybe it's creativity, integrity, love, or faith. These aren't just abstract ideas. They're your internal compass points, the quiet truths that help you hold steady when life feels a little uncertain. And once you've named them, you can begin to live toward them. This doesn't mean you'll never feel lost again, but it does mean you'll have a way to return to center. When I think of this truth, I can't think of a scripture that echoes this any more than Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight. There's something powerful about releasing the need to control every outcome and instead choosing to walk in a direction that honors both who you are, who you're becoming, and actually who God is. The true north doesn't shout. It's not a giant grand opening sign at a store. It whispers to us. And it shows up in small choices. The phone call we make, the opportunity we say no to, the boundary we protect, the quiet time we honor. Those aren't flashy things. They're faith-filled ones. And over time, they create a life that reflects our deepest convictions, not the pressures of the moment. Ultimately, choosing your true north is not about perfection, it's about alignment. It's about showing up, imperfect, but with intention, and saying, this is who I want to be. This is the kind of life I want to live. And every time you make a choice that reflects that, you take one more step toward a life of purpose, peace, and meaning. You see, once we've clarified what truly matters and aligned our inner compass, there's one more shift we have to make. Perhaps the most important one. It's not just about where we're going next, but how we're choosing to get there. This journey isn't just about chasing outcomes, it's about transforming the path we walk. We live in a culture that celebrates arrival, the achievement, the title, the finish line, hooray. But what if the goal isn't simply to get somewhere new, but to walk differently than we did before? What if the real growth lies not in the destination, but in the direction, the posture, the mindset, the values we choose to carry along the way? I often call it the process. There's something deeply freeing about realizing that we don't have to rush toward the next big thing. When you focus on direction, not just destination, you begin to appreciate progress, even when it doesn't feel like it. You start to notice growth in your response to difficulty, grace in the conversations, and courage in your small decisions. These aren't detours, they are the journey. Because choosing a new direction means you're willing to live out what you've just recalibrated. It means creating rhythms that reflect your priorities, whether that's more rest, more presence, deeper conversations, or healthier boundaries. It's what you say matters. And then that meets how you actually live. And that kind of alignment builds lasting momentum. not just a temporary hype that fades off into the distance. This type of realignment is where our faith can truly deepen. Because when we walk with purpose, even before we see results, we're practicing trust. Listen to the words of Paul from Galatians 5, verse 25. He says this: "Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit." That verse isn't just about reaching a destination, it's about walking differently, being guided by something greater than yourself. Because ultimately, the invitation isn't to sprint towards summer or chase that next thing on your list. It's to walk slowly, steadily, and intentionally in a new direction. A direction rooted in who you are, where you've been, and what you've discovered along the way. The kind of direction that creates a life you won't need a vacation from because it's built on peace, meaning, and purpose. So, if you are in that in between space, first of all, don't panic. Don't think you have to solve it or fix it within the next 5 minutes. Instead, recognize the drift for what it is. Not a detour, but a transition. This isn't the end of your direction, it's the beginning of your awareness. And sometimes that awareness is the most honest, courageous place that you can be. So here you are, standing at the intersection between where you've been and where you want to go. Maybe the road behind you was filled with momentum, clarity. Maybe it was filled with confusion. Maybe you're just starting to feel your footing again after a season of some sort of disorientation, whether it was emotional or practical or even spiritual. But today isn't about rushing forward and trying to recapture something that's already passed. It's about asking yourself, what matters most now, and how do I want to move forward from here? Recalibrating isn't about fixing yourself. It's about realigning with what's already true and good in you. The voice of purpose, peace, and potential that gets muffled in the noise of life. This is your invitation to pause, to reflect, and to choose your direction with intention. Even if you're not 100% sure of your final destination, you can still choose to walk differently, with more grace, more clarity, and more care. Maybe you've been carrying someone else's expectations. Maybe you've been sprinting toward a goal that doesn't feed your soul. Maybe you've simply lost track of your why. Today's episode isn't meant to hand you all the answers, but to help you ask better questions. Questions like, what rhythms do I need to reestablish? What relationships need more of my presence? What does peace look like in this next season? You don't need to overhaul your life to find your way again. Sometimes the most meaningful change begins with a subtle shift in direction, a single step towards authenticity, purpose, and connection. So, take a breath, take inventory, and then take one brave step forward. Not to a new destination just for the sake of saying you got there, but in a direction that reflects the truest version of you. Because when your internal compass is realigned, even the smallest steps can lead to the most beautiful places. And with summer just around the corner, what better time to lean into this recalibration? The pace shifts, the days stretch longer, and the margin for reflection grows wider. Use this season not just for rest or escape or vacation, but for realignment. Let the quiet moments, the unhurried mornings, or even the spontaneous adventure help you listen deeply to what your soul has been whispering all along. This summer doesn't need to be packed to be meaningful. It just needs to be intentional. Let it be the season where you stop drifting and start directing your steps again, guided by clarity, peace, and purpose. Well, next time we will be starting a new series for the summer. Sometimes these are some of my favorite ones to put together because they're themed about some summery things. It's one I'm really excited about. It's going to be related to one of my family's favorite pastimes and something I'm sure we will get to do a lot this summer. Play board games. We're going to be theming some of our upcoming episodes around the titles of some of the most popular board games that exist. Next time, we're going to kick it off with Connect 4. We're going to discuss 4 of the most important connections that you need to make in life. Well, I am really looking forward to that, but for now, that is all for this time. As always, I really do appreciate you tuning in this week. We'll see you back here next time when we'll have more for you on cue.